Hi, Devin. Thank you so much for being on the show. I have been looking forward to this for quite some time, and we keep having conversations as friends, as artists, as mothers. So it's just really great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, it's been, for you guys listening, Devin and I have had a lot of back and forth because we come from a similar painting background. We know a lot of the same painters. And you were in our show at Piano Craft Gallery, Finding a Memory, which I curated. So it was so great to have you in that show and then put all the pieces together about our backgrounds.
I know. Yeah, it was so exciting too, because I felt like that show really touched on the things I'm thinking about in my studio all the time. So it
Oh,
was really nice to be part of it.
I love it. And I don't know if I shared this with you or even with listeners about how Finding a Memory, how I came up with that title. So what was funny is I was having a big birthday party because I turned 40, which I also haven't shared on the show, but there you go. And a good friend of mine was with me, and we were talking about something that we had done when we were young painters, both observational painters. And she was like, "How do you find a memory like on our phones?" I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh my God, that's the title of the show, Finding a Memory." But it came from like this idea of life passing, of experiences we have, but also this idea of how we can now quote unquote find a memory on our phone, which is so bizarre, right? Because how can that totally capture a memory?
I know. I love that feature on the phone too. Such a great feature.
No, right, right. But it's perfect with your work because I really love how you incorporate images in your painting by, like one of the pieces that was in the exhibition is these photos that have been scattered about patterns and other objects that you're looking at, which I think much more accurately describe the idea of a memory because it's not one thing, it's many things. So before we get into everything, I would just love to talk about your work. Can you tell us a little bit about your paintings and what you've been working on?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, in graduate school I really focused on inventive painting, and so after graduating and getting away from that and having my son, it's in a lot of ways been easier for me to kind of go back to that looking and responding action in my studio with observational painting. And so I've been setting up different objects that have sentimental value to me, looking at, women artists that I love and kind of pulling open the books and painting some of their paintings. Um, and also making objects out of paper, painting different things and then placing them in the setup. So trying to be inventive as well.
That's really interesting. So you're also creating objects that you then put in the piece and paint from. Um, what are these objects kind of inspired by, or what are they kind of speaking to? Could you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of them are, what's funny, there's an Anna Valdez painting I really love, and she had a laptop in the painting. And so I was like, you know what the hell? I'm gonna paint that little laptop. And I'm gonna put it in there. Some of them are just vessels that I've seen that I don't necessarily want to invest in
Mhm,
buying.
mhm.
But I'm like, I really love that color, that shape, and I want to use it. Um, yeah, it's just kind of random, I guess, like just different things that call to me that I
Well,
decide
what's
to
so cool is how that plays into a memory too. You're like, I saw this vessel, I saw this thing, I saw this color, and I'm gonna remember it and make it. And then I'm going to put it in this space with these other pieces. And all of them together come together not only to create a fabulous painting, but to also speak to a moment in time, which I think is really beautiful. Mm.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I like thinking of them as like this amalgamation of experience. Yeah, it's like all these kind of different things that don't necessarily create a linear narrative, but they all point to something and contain some kind of potency around memory or
Mm,
story.
I love it. So, speaking of a linear movement through time, I haven't asked you, and I'd love to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you really came into the arts and painting.
Yeah, it's funny. I never felt like I could be a painter or an artist as a kid. It's not like I went to museums a lot or was exposed to a lot of different artists. I ended up getting my undergraduate degree in anthropology. I was interested in paleopathology, looking at diseases on prehistoric human remains.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I loved it so much. And I was in graduate school for it, actually. And
Really?
I was. And a federal law, there was a change to a federal law. It's called NAGPRA, Native American Graves Protection Repatriation Act, that was established in 1990 and passed, and there was a 2-word change. John McCain proposed this 2-word change in the early 2000s. And basically, it gave domain to tribes, basically giving them jurisdiction over tribal lands that had funerary sites on them. I don't want to get too technical, but it's like before a certain date, like for instance, the Seminoles in Florida, they're not necessarily indigenous to Florida. And so before this change was made, they did not have the rights to the indigenous population's remains in Florida. But after this change, they did. So all these museums and educational institutions that house skeletal collections, they had to be taken back and reburied.
Mhm.
So after that change happened, a couple of my professors came to me and they were like, what do you want to do? Because you're not going to be doing what you think you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it's funny. I've always been interested in, stories,
Yeah.
stories about people, just, it's taken on a different life, which is pretty cool.
I had no idea actually that that was your background, like specifically that very, because that's a very, it's an area that I had not heard of. It's a very niche thing.
It is. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. And I was like, wow. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how I got into painting. I'm sorry, Erica.
No,
Okay.
all of these things are what lead to who we become, the things that come out in our work. And it's just so interesting that I would assume the area you were studying would be a lot like a puzzle of putting different things together to figure something out. And in your paintings, when I look at them, that is the sensation that I get. So I feel like there's always this connection. Like we have these core drives, interests, thoughts that no matter what area we go into, we kind of bring that to it. So that is very cool. So you went to graduate school for it. And then is that when you made a switch after this change happened and your professors were like, you need a new future?
Yeah, so I did. I left graduate school and I did a lot of soul searching. And I had some friends at the time who were involved in festival painting. Their dad was a palette knife painter. And so I just started painting with them for fun. And I fell in love with painting. It was the weirdest sensation. I remember the first time I painted something, I thought, oh my God, I want to die with a paintbrush in my hand. I never want to do anything else. How have I gone this long and I didn't know about this thing? And I moved to Oklahoma and heard about Mark Lewis. I had no idea who he was or how important he was or how amazing of a painter he was. But a friend of mine was like, you should do a continuing ed with Mark Lewis. And I reached out to him and he was so kind and generous and approved, and allowed me to take the class with him. So I painted with him for 2 or 3 years just as a continuing ed student. And he encouraged me to apply for graduate schools. And I did. I applied to other graduate schools and I got into some others, but ultimately I really wanted to work with him. So I
Yeah.
stayed at the University of Tulsa and
Oh,
painted with him another 3 years.
incredible. Well, I mean, yeah, Mark is that is what a wonderful foundation, background, colleague, mentor, friend, all of these things to have in that area that has led you to where you are today, making the work that you're making. So I have to ask, because I always love this. And I'm thinking about like your space and these vessels you're creating and these setups that you have that you're painting from. Do you tend to work on a lot of paintings at once? Do you work on one? Like take us into your studio space and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. With my son, I know it's so hard to have time set aside. I used to make lists when I was in graduate school. It's funny because I remember hearing an interview with Dana Schutz, and she talked about how she's always making lists for herself. And I thought that was cool. I'm like, wow, I share one tiny little thing with her. um, but now I don't even have time to like write things down. I take photographs. It's like I'm somewhere and I like the shape of something, or I like the way the light's hitting something. It gives me ideas. So I kind of keep a visual diary going of photographs, because I hate to get into my studio and feel like, okay, I have time set aside and I don't know what to do. Um, so that kind of, I feed off of that. I can always go back to something in my phone, find a memory. I can find something. Yeah. But I tend not to have the energy to do, I don't want to say energy. I tend to get overstimulated in my studio. If I have too many things going on at once, I get very overwhelmed. I know there are a lot of painters out there that love having multiple. I'm looking behind you and I'm seeing, a lot of things on your wall. Um, I've never been somebody that could do that. It's like I need to work on the thing that's in front of me. Maybe it's because I have a hard time following through. It's like if I have that on my easel, I'm gonna carry it through. I'm gonna see it through.
Well,
But
I
if
think that's great. I mean, like there has to be a lot of different ways of working, right? And what's interesting to me is the way we work, it has to do with so many different factors. Like the time we have, our personality, the way we're building a painting, like what our painting is about, and that's why I was so curious. I'm like, I wonder if she's working on like multiples or if you were working on one as you're looking or having these things around you. Um, and I would also love to hear a little bit about how you do your setups. Like, do you tend to? I was a person when I painted from observation, I left it to chance. I was very much a like, here's everything, and then I'm gonna figure out like the best composition from it. But I really would let things go to chance, which actually makes sense for what I do now. But I would love to hear about how you're doing your setups.
Yeah, I so some of it is, I mean, I'll see something, okay, oh my God, the people I rent from are probably going to kill me, but I use tacks to like hang things up. Um, and so things are always moving around in my studio because I paint in our basement. And so sometimes I'll see two things together that maybe I wouldn't have normally put together. And I'm like, oh, I kind of like that. Or I'll have a book open. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that painting. I really like that. And so some of it will be chance. And then I remember Susanna Coffey came to visit TU, and I got to take her by myself to the what is that museum in Fayetteville? Is it in Fayetteville or Bentonville, Arkansas? Crystal Bridges.
Oh, Crystal Bridges,
Yeah,
yeah.
she really wanted to see that. And so I could not believe my luck when I was asked to take her there. And she talked to me about still life setups because it was something I talked to her a little bit about. I was still interested in. And she said, you should take compositions from paintings you love and use those, as like kind of as bones for your still life setup. So I do that sometimes. It's like if I'm feeling a little lost, or if I don't trust my own judgment, like is this, going to work or is it not going to work? I'll look at compositions from other painters and try to kind of mimic that structure, if that makes sense.
That is an incredible, yeah, that is such great advice.
I know she's
What a
full of
cool
great advice. No.
I know she's amazing. And she's the person who gave me the advice of painting because I was traveling a lot for work for taking a little like watercolor set or a little acrylic set and doing, she would do self-portraits on plane rides.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I'm like, that's insane. And she's like, it was the mirror that seemed to freak people out. They didn't like the mirror being there, but they like, the working part. And I don't know, Susanna Coffee. And
That is so funny. I love that. It's funny. We did a night painting with her as well, and she told us that she brought her palette on her carry-on. I mean, and it was all, ready to go. There must have been like 30 colors on there.
that's
And
incredible.
yeah, she's like, they didn't give me any trouble at all. They just let me take it on. So
Oh my gosh, I love it. She's got like all these like little painting thoughts, hacks, instructions. So good. Oh man. Well, speaking of female painters, I know that you are a big advocate for, I mean, you're a feminist, you're an advocate for female painters. Um, and I love that in another part of what you do and create, you are supporting female painters. So, in addition to being an incredible painter, you also have Guava Jelly Studios where you make candles. I have one right here in the studio candles, and we have an incredible I like your work candle that we've done together, but I want to hear about Guava Jelly Studios and how it all got started and a little bit about it.
yeah, it started a couple years ago. I wanted to make gifts for friends and family, and I started researching, soap and candles, and I realized that they're just candles specifically are just full of horrible things that I had no idea about. Um, and I decided, well, okay, I'll make candles, but I want to try and, use the best possible ingredients I can that are more healthy. So I wanted to involve my son in the making process of it. Um, and so it just kind of started out as that, just giving gifts. And then I really enjoyed doing it. I thought, well, what if I, how do I make this more intentional? How do I kind of bring this in and make it about something that I care about? Not that I don't care about candles. I do like them. Everybody has them. They're lovely. But, I don't live for candles. I live for painting. So like, how can I make this about painting? Um, and more specifically, how can I make this about painters that I love? And then I just thought, well, I could talk about women painters because people don't talk about them enough. That's the Amelia Pelez candle.
That is awesome. Okay. I just love this story. Here you are, an amazing painter, you're painting, you're doing your thing, and you also enjoyed making these as gifts, and you have made them into like the in the studio candle. It's like in a little paint tin. I mean, come on. Like it is the coolest thing. When you showed these to me, I was just like blown away because they smell amazing. They're made amazing. And what I love is you took this other thing, you were able to bring your painting life into it. And you're also able to have like this other, how do I say this? Like another thing that can also support you as a painter. I think this is something I'm talking to a lot of artists about in the works membership that I run. They're like, yes, I love painting. I want to keep painting. I also have to eat and I need to do
Yeah.
these things. And what do I do? And it can be a really hard road to travel if maybe you don't get a teaching job. I didn't get a teaching job when I came out of my master's program. What do you do? And
Yeah.
so here's this thing where you're able to support yourself as an artist with it and still like make it about painting because you also donate $1 per candle, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I do, to the AAR gallery or air gallery. I've heard it pronounced so many different ways. Um,
Yeah, me
but
too.
they're in Brooklyn. They were founded in the early 70s. It's a permanent exhibition space for women and non-binary artists. And so yeah, I love to be able to help support them and their goals and their mission as a
That
gallery.
awesome. So you're supporting women, you're supporting artists, you're able to support yourself, you're still able to make paintings, so make it about painting. Like, you guys have really got to check out these candles. And that is why I'm thrilled to share that we were able to partner together to create an I Like Your Work candle, which I am like, you guys, this is like a dream.
It's a dream for me. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah. So Devin, can you tell us a little bit about like we got to go back and forth on this candle, you guys. So it's in a paint tin, and I got to be part of like creating the scent a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about that part of it? Because that's another really creative avenue that I've always wanted to be a perfumer or learn about this. So the fact that I got to kind of see a bit of it was cool. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wish I were a perfumer. But yeah, I don't have a lab for that or the know-how. But I do work with I buy from a couple of fragrance houses that are all their products are ethically sourced. There are no phthalates or parabens or anything bad, free of the Prop 65 warning, which I know painters are familiar with because of our all of our paint has that warning on it. But I get a lot of I get a thrill out of kind of experimenting with different fragrances. And so you can blend them and just kind of play around with the percentages and get a lot of different outcomes. I mean, depending on the wax you're using, the wick you're using, the vessel opening, you know, all those things kind of play into how that fragrance, you know, is distributed and what it smells like. So it's a lot of fun.
It was so cool. So yeah, Devin sent me like some samples. We got to choose the I Like Your Work fragrance, which you guys are going to love. It is, I mean, they were all really good. It was really hard to
Well,
choose one.
it's funny because the one you picked, yeah, I just kind of was like, oh, this is an interesting one. I'll throw it in there, and you liked it.
Yeah, I
So
loved it. So can you tell our listeners where they can find this candle and of course all your other in the studio candles that you have?
yes, the website is guavajellystudio.com. And yeah, you can see all the candles. I'm actually going to be putting up Christmas candles in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be doing a Rosemary Beck candle. Mary Fedden, she was a British still life painter. Joan Erdley. Erdley, that's how you say her name. Scottish painter, did a lot of seascapes, and Clara Peters, 17th century Baroque painter.
So you see, not only is it a candle and supporting women artists, it's also a history lesson, like an art history lesson.
I know. I hope the candles are a kind of call to action for people. You know, they see someone's name and they want to know more.
Yeah, the last painter, I'm like, I'm gonna have to look that up. You could like start having them like with little art history books and stuff. But what a cool gift for artists, because again, it's made for us.
I know. I'm sure you're aware of that Philip Guston quote about the studio ghosts. You know, what does he say? It's like teachers' friends, painters from history are all in your studio, and one by one they walk out. But I like the idea of having, you know, a Gretna Campbell candle in my studio, and maybe I could conjure her, invite her in, tell her to stay. Don't go anywhere, Gretna. I need your help.
I love it. I have another one burning somewhere in here. Well, I don't have it burning right now, but I kind of have the same sensation. I feel like a lot of artists also have a like way they settle into their studio. A friend of mine was a studio assistant for a really great artist in New York who has passed. And he told me the story that this artist would always light these candles and incense and like really have this mood set before he would start painting. And I was like a young artist hearing about this, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to have
I need a ritual.
I need a ritual. you know?
Yeah.
And I think you kind of begin to develop your own. But I like that idea of like, okay, I'm going to like call this artist into practice, or just in your mornings, Devin and I were talking about how I like to get up early in the morning before my kids are up, when everything's quiet and dark. And I tend to light a candle and I have like a meditation space. And just being able to even light these in your home and think about these artists, these female artists who have done so much for us, as we've moved forward, and just have made incredible work. So, Devin, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show to talk about your work and to share your candles that you've been creating.
Thank you so much for letting me be here. It's so exciting for me.
It's been great. It's been great. And thank you again for partnering with I Like Your Work for the I Like Your Work Studio Candle. I hope you guys go check it out. We will be supporting Air Gallery with those donations. And of course, you're also supporting, an artist who is making work and also continuing to find a way to serve artists, serve others, and have a life as a painter. So, Devin, can you tell us again where we can find you online?
Sure. My personal via website is devinmhowell.com, and Guava Jelly is guavajellystudio.com.
Excellent. And you guys, I'll have all of that in the show notes, and we'll be sharing it over on the podcast. I Like Your Work podcast on Instagram. So again, Devin, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
You too, Erica. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.